sent out at a later time. Also, remember that there are other sessions that will be going on for the next 5 weeks. So if you are interested in learning about other conversations for supporting first-year students in the classroom, or how we're working with data on our campus, or what other partners are doing, you can sign up for those other sessions as well. But like I said, this is not my show. I'm going to turn it over to Shayla Thomas and Armada Henderson here to introduce themselves and to begin their presentation.
Thank you, Darius, and thank you, Jenny, for giving both Armada and I this opportunity to engage our colleagues in such an important conversation. Darius mentioned, my name is Thomas, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director for the Young Scholars Program.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all here with us today. My name is Armada Henderson, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Director for the Young Scholars Program.
Armada and I have planned a great discussion with you all this morning or this early afternoon, and so we want to provide you with an overview of what we plan to discuss with our time together. Although we see many familiar faces in the room, I'm so excited. We have over 100 people in the room with us today, Armada. We're going to provide you a short overview of the Young Scholars Program. I will focus on what's happening, what we're seeing with students as they prepare for their transition from high school to college through their senior year. And Armada is going to provide you with a conversation about what we're seeing students as they experience their first year experience this past year. We'll then go and we'll talk together about how we've been maintaining our staff and ensuring staff have staff well-being. And then, like true educators, we want to leave you with a few reflection questions as you go back and talk with your team, as you think about the conversations that we've had today. As Darius mentioned, he's going to be controlling our chat, and then if there's any burning questions, please feel free to interrupt us, but we do have some time built in at the end of our presentations to have an open discussion about some of the concepts and topics that we've talked about today. So let's talk about the Young Scholars Program. Armada and I have the honor of serving as in leading the Young Scholars Program that's been in existence for the past 32 years. The Young Scholars Program supports the preparation and the access and success of academically talented first-generation students from low and moderate income families. We recruit our students in the 8th grade, and we provide a comprehensive college readiness program for the duration of their high school experience that prepares students for their transition to Ohio State University or other institutions of higher education. When Armada and I took the lead of the Young Scholars Program in 2018, we adopted 4 guiding principles to lead and frame our work with students. We use these frames of access, affordability, completion, and personal development. And you will see those guiding principles as we talk about how we develop and implement programs and how we decide how we're going to support students in their transition from high school to college, their integration to the campus community, and then preparation for post-baccalaureate options. I see a lot of our staff members in the room today, and I want to shout out all of our program coordinators and managers across the state of Ohio. Our program is comprised of 19 dedicated staff members who work with our students in our 9 identified cities. Currently, there are 1,000 scholars participating in the Young Scholars Pipeline. We recruit and identify students major urban metropolitan districts. About 600 students in school are in high school, and then about 400 students. We currently have about 400 undergrad enrolled young scholars on campus. And although we don't provide direct support to our graduate professional students, we have about 30 graduate professional young scholars who are also enrolled in academic programs across the campus right now. So we're really proud of that. So like any practitioner, we begin our conversation with grounding our work. We're going to use the work of our colleague and our friend to the program, Dr. Laura Perna from Penn State, to discuss improving college access and success for low income and first generation students. We agree that our work must be multifaceted, that it must be comprehensive and collaborative. In constructing our student support services, we must ensure that we provide scholars with the necessary financial resources, support scholars' academic preparedness for college level courses and course requirements. And then this is where for us, it becomes really important that all students and families are equipped. And so I'm going to add an emphasis, all students and families are equipped with information and knowledge required in college-related requirements and processes, and that all students and families can make appropriate college-related choices. Is important for us. And then finally, that we equip students with tools to navigate the complicated pathways into, across, and through our institution. So understanding these requirements, I'd like to share with you what we're learning during these unprecedented times as students transition from high school to college. Again, we're practitioners, we're nerds at heart. And so using Dr. Nancy Schlossberg's transition theory to understand, plan, and support students transition from high school, we're going to use Dr. Nancy Schlossberg's student transition theory to understand, plan, and support students transition from high school to college. In her work, Dr. Schlossberg defines a transition as an event that disrupts roles, routines, and relationships. So if we consider the current incoming freshmen, many of the major events demarking a transition have been missed or, even canceled. Common examples are like students having opportunities to attend homecomings, proms. Many of their extracurricular activities have been canceled. And most importantly, some students missed an opportunity to have a formal graduation transition. According to the theory, transitions require adaptation and begin with an ending, right? So for example, a student might be finishing school and then working over the summer and then preparing for the transition to college. But individualized learning and an increase in student employment and their work hours, really, we have lots of students who are working way more hours than they would traditionally do when they were enrolled in high school, have blurred the ending points for a lot of our students and the new beginning points for our students. And then finally, pre-COVID, having an understanding of student transitions as practitioners, we were able to plan for the students coming to college, right? So we have a first year experience program that allowed us to plan for how students were going to be managed through that transition. And then we could assist students with managing that major change or that event. Pre-COVID, we could plan for commuter students and residential students, right? Now we have students on campus but virtual. We have students as a commuter in person. We have commuter students who are attending classes in person. We have students who are commuter but virtual. And so, like, how for us, how do you plan for all these things, right? How do you plan for all these transitions? And because transitions prompt individuals to formulate new assumptions about themselves and their future, currently the pre-college program staff are meeting with enrolled high school students, and this has always been a part of our curriculum, but we've had to refocus some of our programs to provide coaching and guidance to help students understand and respond to the transitions and how they can benefit from the challenges of these transitions. So our pre-college staff are conducting right now one-on-one discussions and workshops, many of them deadline driven, right? So right now our students, they've already submitted their FAFSAs. This month, our workshop title is helping them to prepare for the housing contract. But really our conversations, a lot of our workshops are helping students to evaluate their challenges, exploring their options and increasing their coping strategies. And that has been something that's really come up a lot for us, is how do we help students cope with what it is they're experiencing? Many of our workshops have been centered around student well-being, normalizing feelings that the students are having, and then sustaining aspirations for pursuing college. And that has been really big, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We were so fortunate to adapt a common read with our students this year. And so this year, our students are reading Educated by, our high school seniors are reading Educated by Tara Westover. And we've been using Educated as a book text to analyze like family management, college-going behaviors, self-realization, and preparing students for their transition to college. COVID has challenged the students' transition process and required us to, as a program, to reconsider how our service delivery model supports student success. Students are experiencing this move in, move through, and move out process in just unprecedented ways. And so we were joking last week in a conversation to say, we don't think that there were any, in the conversation with Jenny, we don't think there were any theories that were created to help us to understand the college development and the student going process that were developed during a pandemic. So how do we take all these things that we've learned and that we understand about the student transition process and student college going process and apply it during a pandemic? So for us, I'm going to talk about what we are experiencing with students as they transition to college from a academic perspective or academic related experiences. Many of our students are facing the challenge of reprioritizing what is important to them. And so their most salient identity is no longer being a student. Many of our students are now caregivers to younger family members. They are now caregivers to their family at all. So many students who are picking up hours of working because their family members may have been laid off from their jobs. They are maybe still trying to hold on to that idea of being a student, but they have thought about how do they reprioritize some of their roles and responsibilities. They have begun to incorporate lots of non-traditional learning techniques. And so we learned through our summer program that many of our students are cell phone savvy. They're not necessarily technology savvy. We sent in our summer program, we sent out iPads to all of our students. And when we evaluated our students at the end of the program, many said that they either did not own a device that was individual to them, they shared a device, and that device was older, and that some of the new technology that we had sent with them, like the iPad and the iPad Pen, that they had never had experience using. And so we have these cell phone learners who are like learning on the go. If you have the opportunity to instruct a class, you may see lots of black boxes. And then when you see the box flash with their picture in them, they're like in the car. You're like, we're in class. Why are you in the car? I teach a personal financial health class, and the student was completely engaged last night in class, but she was also building a shelf while she was in class. And so it makes you wonder, like, how engaged were you? Their performance is changing, right? So for us, with our high school seniors, we see lots of students who have always known or have always had many identities about being scholastically successful, and they are still experiencing success, but that success is like a B now. It's not an A success, it's a B success. And so these feelings of like inadequacy, and it really is introduced for some of our students experience like imposter syndrome, wondering if college is really the next step for them, if they're prepared academically to pursue college, if this is, if they are as smart as they thought they were, because now a lot of the learning is individualized and is their responsibility. We've absolutely seen students increase in student well-being, right? So well-being, I'm sorry. So students wanting to focus on taking care of themselves and managing themselves, but then we've also seen a decrease in motivation for some students. And so that's also led to like an apathetic response to deadlines and tasks. I'll get it done when I get it done. I have time, those types of ideas, like it'll get done. And so we've seen that. But then we've also seen like students being super resilient in thinking about and reinventing themselves and how they can experience COVID. And so they've overcome some of the challenges, but then that resilience has always also led to them reconsidering the allure of higher education, right? So thinking about like, how should I engage in the traditional college system? Lots of students who are now entrepreneurs, and maybe that being supported by lots of like government funds that support like minority entrepreneurship. And so lots of our students who have started small businesses, or because their extracurricular activities are not taking up a lot of their time, they've been able to take advantage of passions and interests that they kind of did on the side on the weekends, but now they can invest way more time in those opportunities because it's not being occupied as much by the school day, right? And so we see lots of students rethinking about, should college be my next step? Should I pursue this passion opportunity? Because there's also lots of money out there that supports minority entrepreneurship. And then we've also seen, when we look at their transition as it relates to their relationships with other people, right? And so we, typically, as a student transitions from high school to college, we would want the student to transition from maybe being more dependent on their family member to being interdependent, right? Gaining and engaging in these co-beneficial relationships with folks that can help them make their transition to the university and campus and engage into the university community. But now we have students moving from like dependent to very independent and maybe even codependent, where you have like family members depending on these students for sustainability in ways that has not existed before. And then students are typically, especially underrepresented students and minority groups, are typically very communal. And so we have this like change in the relationship because now they're very isolated. Even thinking about students and how we engage in like the residence halls and those being a very communal places. And now students may be experiencing isolation or quarantine, right? So that's happening at the high school and the college side. We talk about this new commuter experience, right? And so you have, and I think that this is interesting because for us, culturally, we have lots of, we have a very diverse student body. If it represents, even though we work with underrepresented students, culturally, this helps a lot of our students because they were already having conversations with their families about living on campus. And so culturally, this COVID saved a lot of students because they did not have to have that conversation. They didn't have to decide whether or not they were going to live on campus and maintain their scholarship, or like now they can stay home, right? And so there's this like new commuter experience where they can still gain all the experiences of, or gain the experiences of being in college, but they can do it from the comfort of their own living rooms or their own homes. Students are also starting to identify and focus on and really maintain and really evaluate what are the most important relationships that I should be maintaining. And so, luckily and for us, many times our pre-college program coordinators are among those identified important relationships. But if that student is not seeing us as being an important or contributor to their livelihood, then sometimes our relationship kind of comes down on this totem pole and they're saying, I don't have a lot of time. I don't feel like investing a lot of time into a lot of relationships. So I'm going to prioritize which ones are most important, and I'll stay in touch with those folks. At the same time, we've seen this transition of students feeling very connected to leadership in their schools. And because of COVID and our response to COVID, school district leaders who used to be very invested and very engaged in students' day-to-day experience at school, they just don't have time, and it's not purposeful, right? It's just that we're dealing with so many things that we just don't have the time to invest in that direct contact like we had when we were in person. And students are feeling, sometimes they feel kind of shafted by that. Like I used to have this person who was always checking on me, saw me in the hallway, and I just don't have that anymore. One of these things that are very personal to me, I have a current freshman, but even during his senior year, one of the things that we went back and forth with was how students' academic performance leads to opportunity versus how networking on campus and gaining cultural capital leads to opportunity. And that is like a dissonance for our students right now. So some students think that, if I do well, then someone will see that I have a 4.0 and that will lead to opportunities, as opposed to, and it's very hard because we're quarantined, that we can't build these relationships with folks. We can't network with folks to help us to get to our next steps. They're not as readily available to us. And so helping students to navigate, how do you build cultural capital in this COVID environment? And then what is important, like, can I just perform and that be enough for students to give, or can that be enough for folks to give me an opportunity? And so those are a couple things that we are experiencing on the high school side.
And so I am going to touch base on what we've learned during COVID, during our first year, with our first year students and our first year experience. So I think it's important to have an understanding of what our first year programming components are. So for our students, we specifically focus on 5 different programs to transition them and get them settled in during their first year. We start off with our Ysp Summer Orientation. So we usually have an orientation session where we're talking to the students about YSP requirements, but also introducing them to resources that are available to them through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. We run a week-long early arrival program. And then we also have a very unique bridge curricular learning community. We have closed and clustered courses where we have most of our first year students enrolled in those sections. They're enrolled in it, usually at least one section, but many are enrolled in more. Those courses that we cover for the past couple of years have been math, English, psychology, and economics classes. Our students will also engage regularly with a success coach who is a full-time staff member with YSP. And they also are assigned a peer who is an academic success partner. We were able to run all of these programs primarily in a virtual format, and it was very challenging for our staff, but it was extremely beneficial for our students. And one of those reasons is that throughout all of these programs, we have embedded coordinated care. And so when you think about coordinated care, we're basically establishing these partnerships and working in collaboration with key offices and key individuals across campus because we have certain goals that we want to achieve in transitioning and ensuring the success of our students during the first year, but we also recognize that there are units on campus who have the same or very similar goals. And I know there are a lot of people in this session today who we work very closely with in some of these relationships. One of the things that was very key for us in this first term, well, over the summer and fall semester, were key characteristics of our engagement model. And these characteristics were very important because they helped us to continue to build on the relationships that our pre-college staff had established with our incoming students, and also working with them to help make sure that they were engaged and felt supported. And so when we think about all of the programs that we are managing with our students in general, but especially in relation to our first year population, our programs are proactive. So we have to be able to identify, what are going to be those potential barriers of success for students, but they're intentional as well because we want to make sure that we're focusing on the YSP population. So the challenges that maybe groups outside of the first gen low income population may have, our students, those challenges could be completely different. So we have to make sure that we're intentional in how we're programming and designing our services for students. They're also prescriptive. Because we want to lean on the knowledge that we have as practitioners about this student population so that we are providing structured support for them. So we're not starting from scratch. We know that there is data out there. We know that there is theory out there that informs the practice. And so in many ways, we are prescriptive with the work that we're doing. And also the majority of our staff are first gen, and we also have YSP alumni. So they've experienced some of the same things that the students that we're working with have, and we're using that to our advantage. When we talk about it being our services being developmental, there's a holistic approach in monitoring students and partnering with them to establish goals. When we talk about the services, they're intrusive. So we are going to come out and ask the hard questions about students' personal lives, about their academics, because we know that all of these things impact the student experience on campus. But also very important to that relationship building is this mutual trust and respect. And that has been essential in serving students during this time as well. And then embedded in all of our services, we have to focus on cultural inclusivity. We have a very diverse student population, and they had unique transition challenges. And so we always want to make sure that we're mindful of their diverse backgrounds. Okay. So when we're talking about coordinated care during a pandemic, that was essential to the work that we were doing. And really, it started off with communicating with students. So it was very important for us to connect with students to find out what is it that you're concerned about and what is challenging for you right now. And that began all the way back in spring 20 when we surveyed our students who were on campus already to see how they were feeling about the pandemic and different changes that were happening around them. And so students really talked to us about finances, employment concerns, housing, food security, access to technology. And we were able to take that information and use it in preparation for our incoming class. Because if our current students have these concerns, then our incoming class will most likely have similar concerns as well. In addition, we worked with our pre-college staff to do an exit survey for our seniors who were in high school. And on that exit survey, we were able to collect information from them as well, which basically created a foundation for conversations that we were having about our upcoming programming, orientation, early arrival program, assigning academic success partners to our incoming class. And from there, we took all of that information. We connected with our established networks on campus to talk to them about what was coming up, what we may need, and what was available to us. But we also had to establish some new networks for resources and support as well. And so you can see here, there is a list. It's definitely not exhaustive, but these are all of the offices that we connected with spring semester of 20, summer of 20. And when we talk about coordinated care, we were able to utilize the information that these units gave us in our upcoming programs, but we were also able to invite them to come and train our staff and also speak with our students about their upcoming semester as well. What we found through our semester as well as a result of COVID is that instructors play a key role. And we've always known this. The data says that relationships with faculty and professors and instructors for first gen and low income students are very essential for their engagement, their integration, and their sense of belonging. But during this time when they felt so isolated and everything had changed as far as their expectations around how they would engage in classes, they expected to be in these, large lecture halls, and they expected to be walking around on campus back and forth to their classes. And when all of these things changed, our instructors and their relationships and the feedback that they were giving to students was very important. They were the link between what we would hear from students and then what their actual classroom experiences were. And we were able to structure some different programs to provide opportunities for early student intervention. So the university as a whole uses the on-course system for progress reporting. And we had instructors across campus who were giving us feedback about our students who were in their different classes. And we were able to build campaigns and meet with students to have discussions about that feedback. But one of the really important programs that we utilized to structure that early intervention was our Bridge program. And our Bridge program instructors who were teaching our closed and clustered courses, we would meet monthly to have discussions about what was going on in the classroom, to discuss university updates that would impact their engagement with students, All of them completed progress reports for every YSP student that was enrolled in their class. And from those progress reports, we were able to schedule one-on-one meetings with the instructors for coordinated care. So we could specifically talk about individual students and what was happening to them in the classroom and how they were feeling in the classroom. But our bridge meetings also became a place of support for YSP staff and bridge instructors. We could throw ideas around and have conversations about how we were feeling as staff members. I remember one specific meeting, we were talking about canceling class, and there was a lot of guilt from me, I'll say, because I had canceled class one day, and the other instructors piped up and said, hey, I also canceled class because, you know, during this time, I just felt like it was a break that the students needed. And so it was a great space for us to talk about students, but then to also talk about our own relationships and engagement with them. As we were progressing through the semester, especially in relationship to classes and spaces where we're engaging with students, we really began to realize that there was a reimagining of what student engagement was that needed to happen. And so we think about student engagement as students in person, talking to us, we physically see them, we know that they're involved, and that's just not the case. And there were questions about, you know, why are there so many Black screens in meetings and in classroom spaces? And we basically asked the students that question on a survey. And, you know, they said, hey, Ms. Armeda, I was there. I was engaged, I was listening, but I was in my pajamas. Or, you know, I felt like I looked crusty and I didn't want people to see me on the camera. And so as instructors and individuals who are working with students and we see these Black screens, you know, we're worried about them. We're wondering if they're not actually there, but they are. They're there and they are engaged. What we also learned was that these spaces that we had with students, they were very important spaces to build a sense of community. And so this slide has a comment from a student. She talked about the role of group discussion in her class. And a lot of our bridge courses had group discussion embedded, whether that was on Carmen or during the classroom time. And students were really active on group discussion boards, responding to one another and chatting about their experiences on campus. But these are questions that we specifically asked, you know, how are you feeling on campus right now? You know, where are you eating? What are the resources you're finding most useful? And they would chat in the group discussions about this. They appreciated the opportunity to have one-on-one time with their professors and their instructors. And they also pointed out the importance of being in a space where they were familiar with the people that they were working with. They felt that led to greater engagement, that they felt more comfortable speaking and participating. And over again in class surveys and surveys about success coaching and our academic, our peer leaders, we see students talking about the importance of connecting to help each other. And we see this word family over and over again. It felt like a family. Class feels like a family. My success coach feels like, you know, he's part of my family. And so when we're thinking about, you know, student engagement, one, students are participating if we're giving them a safe space that they feel comfortable to participate, and we're flexible with how they're doing that. But then also right now, during a time of crisis, you know, it's important to them to feel like people care about them, that the spaces that they're in are familiar, and, you know, that they're with family. When we're talking about student engagement as well, students really refer to coaches that they're working with, the success coaches, as a lifeline. These are individuals who connected them to resources in very challenging situations where they thought, they didn't know what to do or where to go. Just having that one person that they could contact who could connect them with the right resources was very important, but then also followed up to actually make sure that everything had panned out the way that it should. One of the things that our success coaches have found very helpful during this time has been to not only connect with the student, but to connect directly with the referral. So I know there are some academic advisors on the call. I saw Kanisha and I saw Stacy Song. We would get on the phone and call them directly and ask them about their students and the circumstances around different notes and things on course. So having someone to connect them in these challenging kind of situations and then also follow up with individuals and with the students was really relevant. And then the peer connection, having a student to talk to about their experiences as a student and speaking to them on platforms that are relevant and are flexible for them. So not all of the students like to chat on Zoom all the time. So our coordinator for our academic success partners allowed them to meet on FaceTime, on Google Talk, to text. However they communicated, as long as they were connecting, that was what was most important and most valuable. And then finally, we have been questioning during this time with our first year students, what does it really mean to be at risk? In some of the conversations around campus, we've been talking about the impact of pass, non-pass. We don't know what the impact of that is going to be for our students for this semester, or academically how they may be challenged next year as a result of some of their the decisions that they've made. When you think about risk factors that are generally associated with our first gen low income students, they are, of course, disproportionately underrepresented. So they're dealing with racism and microaggressive actions toward them, sometimes stereotype threat. There are often decreased opportunities for social and academic engagement. So they may feel less academically prepared. They're more likely to enroll in developmental courses. Sometimes there's less financial support. And so they may be living off campus. Giving them the option to live off campus was perfect this semester because they were managing limited resources. And they may also experience feelings of survivor's remorse where they have way more resources than their family. They're living quite comfortably, and maybe individuals back home are not as comfortable as they are. New risk factors to potentially consider, of course, online courses. Our first year students have a severe lack of study skills, and there's this illusion of free time because their classes are not necessarily scheduled. And so they're doing lots of other things. As Shayla mentioned, they're prioritizing their time differently now. We have unemployed parents, guardians, and immediate family members who unfortunately lost their jobs when the pandemic first hit us. And so some of our students are moving home to help support their family, and these traditional roles that they're taking on as caregivers and maybe just doing chores or sitting with grandma during the day, they're taking away from their time as students. Some of them are increasing their work hours, and they're working in jobs that are high-risk jobs where they're really being exposed to COVID quite frequently. And then living on campus, is this a new risk factor? There's a potential increased exposure to COVID in the residence hall. And we've heard from students that there are lots of time-consuming safety protocols. They have to test quite often. They feel they are in isolation. They're quarantined when their roommate is out having a good time and they were trying to stay, to themselves. And so how are all of these things impacting students?
You would think all the time that we've been on Zoom that I could hit unmute quickly. And I thank Armeda for talking about what we're learning about students as they transition and engage in the campus community. But as leaders, we also had to think about how is COVID and our response to COVID impacting us as a team. And so I think that before COVID, Armeda and myself might identify ourselves as more as like a transformational leader, and trying to enact the changes through the Young Scholars Program and the success of our students. But when we sat and we reflected on how COVID has impacted our leadership, we really were able to identify it as us taking a more humanistic leadership approach, being very strategic and thinking about the protocols and the policies and how those, and sometimes we were learning, right? We were building the ship as we were sailing it, but learning about things that we needed to react to very quickly, being very strategic in how we began to change and adapt to what was being asked of us in the program, but at the same time also being very reasonable and compassionate and respectful of our staff members. We spent a lot more time having meetings with our staff so that we continue to feel engaged. And recognizing that and acknowledging our staff, knowing that they are also experiencing COVID too, right? And so I think one of the words that my staff hear us talk about a lot, and as we talk to our partners in the communities and on campus, is can we extend each other a bit of grace? I don't know right now an acceptable response, right? Sometimes you just don't know. I don't have an answer. And just in sitting in that space, because things are happening so rapidly and changing so rapidly that sometimes it has to come down the pike for us to understand what is happening. Being very sensitive that our staff, and Armeda mentioned it earlier in her presentation, that we have staff on our team who are Young Scholar alumni, and many of our staff members share in the identities of being first generation. And when we began college, we came from low and moderate income family homes. And so sharing some of those identities and having some of those same expected experiences as what our students are having. Myself and one of our other staff members, we both had seniors in high school last year. And some of our other staff members have students who are also in college. And so it's very easy for us to know what we want. And we also mourn the losses of some of those missed opportunities, demarcations for transition. And so just having conversations about, experiencing compassion fatigue, and then also understanding that, not knowing what happens next, not knowing what, this summer may look like, just helping them cope with the uncertainty, and that we don't have to have all the answers drawn out. I think that what's so unique when you were working with first generation and low income students is that you understand the power that having a college experience, what it can do for the trajectory of that student and their family. And so you're just insistent on making sure that the student is successful because you know that it can enact change for a generation. And so building some parameters that so that you're not so overwhelmed with these ideas, that you're also taking care of yourself. I mentioned that we are engaged in, I think every morning, Monday through Friday, I have a staff meeting on my calendar, like the 8 to 11, I'm meeting with different components of the staff in different groups. We have lots of short individualized meetings with staff, and in some of those meetings, we are trying to work through policies and protocols and programs, but a lot of times too, we're just having conversations about how we are coping and how we're adapting, making sure that we are sharing community. We're almost sometimes maybe feeling like we're over communicating some things, making sure that everyone is understanding what is happening. And then a couple weeks ago, ODI is fortunate to have an embedded counselor. We invited that embedded counselor to come and talk to the staff, come talk to us, because we're in this COVID, we're dealing with COVID, we're responding to COVID too. And the traditions of how we operated and we did our work has changed as well. So it's not just changing for the students, but we're experiencing these changes as well. And so we needed an opportunity to process what we were experiencing. And then also just making sure as leaders of our team that we are sharing, we're very transparent, and that we're sharing communication in a timely manner. And I guess an example that I can provide is when Dr. McFerrin released information about the grade changes for this upcoming semester, immediately that team had a conversation so that one, to make understood what were the changes, but then two, to make sure that they were able to give adequate information to the students, and then thinking about how does this going to change how we coach the students through making some decisions for themselves this academic semester.
And then I'll just discuss briefly, unexpected challenges, because I know we're running out of time here, but one of the things that we have noticed and we've heard from our partners across campus too, is that from the students, there's this sense of an oversaturation of support, or like information overload. And so they're receiving email communication is basically the main form of communication now. And they are receiving so many emails from so many different places. It's been hard for them to kind of sort through all of this. And some of the success coaches have literally been on the phone with students and had to say, this is the subject line, look for this message, which is not unlike my 11-year-old, but the same thing. Trickle down communication. So especially as like the different policies were coming out for the university related to move in, move out, grading, a lot of times it went through a series of people, offices, and then finally it got down to our student service unit. And as a result, we were very reactive versus our proactive actions that we like to take in serving students. And so I think this is an area as an institution we could work on partnering with some of the different units to make sure that information is shared in a timely manner that benefits the students. Also, some of the policies and procedures that we were implementing, students were asking us questions and we couldn't decipher it ourselves. We would have to call the source to get information. And so some of these policies are very complicated and it takes some time to understand and relearn them. Establishing goals for our program staff was a challenge during this time, because you have this trajectory that you followed and you know what your retention numbers typically look like. You know what your appointments, how many appointments you typically have in a semester, and COVID just blew that all up. So how do we begin to reestablish, goals for our incoming class, and then even for our students we have on campus? And then we have some concern about the long-term academic impact on our students who are in our pre-college pipeline. And how is that going to impact them when they apply and it's time for the university to make admissions decisions? What does the eligibility of those rising cohorts look like?
So we have some homework. Armeda and I are accustomed to teaching classes, and so we have some homework for you. One, we appreciate your time and your energy today during this presentation. As Darius promised in the beginning, we are going to open up so that we can have some open discussion. But as you listen to our conversation or our discussion about what we are learning from our first generation students, I hope that you can take this back to your team and ask yourself or ask your team, how can your department or your program continue to support first year students during and after COVID? What are the positive consequences of COVID-19 to your program department related to student engagement? We had some very archaic practices in our program. And so COVID has forced us to update some things and rethink about, like, is this the best way to get some of our practices completed? So there were some positive consequences of COVID-19 for us. What partnerships can you develop to help support students and first generation, first year students on campus? What resources do you need to support your ability to engage first generation, first year students? And then what methods are your team using to ensure staff well-being and avoiding burnout? And so hopefully you can have listened to our conversation and you can reflect on these, reflect on what we've discussed and use it as you have further conversations with your team about how you're supporting students during COVID.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. But like Shayla said, and I said at the beginning, we are going to open up for questions just in case if you all do have questions, you could just unmute your mic or you could drop it in the chat and I could read it out loud.
I'll hop in here. This is Christine Meadows from the Knowlton School of Architecture. Thank you so much for your presentation today. It was really helpful. My question is actually for Armeda about some of the new risk factors that you were mentioning of some of the things that our students are experiencing outside the classroom. And I'm just wondering, as an advisor, what kind of coaching suggestions would you give those students, especially if they eventually have to tell a professor like, hey, I'm caring for a loved one back home? Because I'm concerned that they may deliver that message and it won't be well received from the professor, because some professors are caring and some can be a little bit salty. I'm just wondering if you can share maybe some tips and tricks that I can relay to my students, so when they have to, if they have to have that conversation, they feel well prepared.
And Christine, my Skype phone was ringing while you were talking, so I just want to make sure that I got your question. So you're wondering how we coach our students through speaking with their instructors about personal things that are impacting them academically in the classroom?
Yes, and then any tips you might have for advisors to kind of help foster that conversation for the students.
So we typically will encourage students to go through the normal university route so that things are documented, right? So our friends over in student advocacy, they know us well, and we reach out to them quite often to ask questions, and sometimes we will even create a case for students through advocacy who we know are having some significant challenges related to what is going on back home. So we typically do use those avenues. We use Title IX as well, because we do have students who are student parents, and sometimes those difficult conversations that they're having with their instructors are related to their own care for their children. And so we try to get those documented, and we also will document those conversations, of course, in cryptic ways in on course, so that we can show that the student has been connecting with someone about this over time, and it's not just something that they're coming up with out of the blue. Frequently, we will contact you as academic advisors to have these conversations as well. And in some circumstances, we actually talk to the instructor. And so the student will come to us and they may say that they've tried to speak to this individual, they're having a difficult time. And we will email the instructor, or we will give them a call and have a conversation with them personally about what is going on with the student. Now, ideally, we want to teach them self-advocacy, because that's something that's huge with our population. A lot of times they're more independent and don't operate as self-advocates for themselves. And so we want to teach that to them, but in certain circumstances, we will definitely do that. I think the other part of that conversation is that, these students have worked really hard to get to this point. And we don't want these external challenges to impact their ability to persist. And so that is an honest conversation that we have to have with them about the true impact that some of these challenges may have on their ability to actually just persist through college to a degree. And that can, sometimes be a difficult conversation as well. Shayla, I don't know, did you want to add anything? So I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there was a question from Julia in here that says, thinking about creating a pre-college event to help students transition to OSU, are the units that have recently developed such a program that we can learn from, or do you have any suggestions?
So I think for Julie, it just depends on what it is you want to achieve. And so there's been a couple of pre-college events that have been really successful for us, in that departments tend to favor over others. And so during our Samuel Du Bois Cook Summer Academy program, we host a faculty mixer. And it really allows the faculty to, first of all, we identify the students and then we prepare them for the faculty mixer. That's a big step. And so we give them about over 100 or so questions that they can ask prospective. They engage with them and we were successful this summer in putting them in breakout rooms and having them engage the faculty. And it wasn't about, some of it engaged in their practice, but some of it was about just understanding how they kind of work. They were. And so historically, the faculty mixers have been extremely successful for us. Other programs, and again, it depends on what it is you want. Is it that you want them to understand more about your program? Is it that you want them to be able to identify someone else in the department that they can connect with as a peer or as a faculty member? Or are you trying to get them to do something next? And so we can certainly offline, we could share some of our other programs that we have historically participated in. I will invite you all, many of you may have received an email this week from Brandon Britt, who's the program coordinator for YSP. We host a 9th grade visit. And so for our freshmen in high school right now, we invite faculty and staff across the university to come and host a mini lecture with our 9th graders. And it really aligns with the freshman seminar program. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do, lecture, 45 minutes. It's a 45-minute lecture on something that you're teaching right now. It could be something that is a passion. So for example, historically, Melissa Beers out of psychology, he's come and talked about the psychology behind Harry Potter. Dr. Urban has come and he's done the physics of video games and why jumping is all wrong, and it's wrong in video games, like that's not possible. And so I think that we've always had someone like from the law school come over and they've presented a case and had the students debate a case. And so there's ways and inorganic ways to engage the prospective students coming into the university. For us, it's about having students to get to know faculty members humanistically, right? Like they're human. This is not someone to be afraid of or who is going, who's there to make you feel like literally you should be looking at your instructional staff as a part of you. Not someone who's against you that wants to make you fail. And so any ways that we can help the students engage faculty members and so that they can become more familiar with them as they make the transition, the better. But I would love to have conversations with you offline to talk about some ideas.
Okay, this is Julie. Thank you. Yeah, we've never done any from linguistics. We've never done any kind of pre-college event before, so it's kind of a new idea to us. And that was helpful. So I'm just trying to think of ways to get started having some type of event before autumn begins. Thank you.
Julie, I'm going to make sure that I take down your name because I want to make sure you get that invitation from Brandon Britt so that if you guys are interested in joining us, you can do that. Okay.
You want that via the chat then?
I can look you up. I'm going to write down your name and I'll look you up.
Okay. McGorry, McGory.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Julie, there's a early arrival committee that also exists on campus. Right now, Mylan Thomas and Nicole Morgan are in charge of that, but David Graham is the vice president over TAG, and he can definitely get you acclimated to that group as well with more resources.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I do have one more question that says, did you use Zoom for the pre-entry program?
We actually use Zoom for everything. And so we had some archaic practices that we had to revamp really quickly when COVID hit last summer. And so one of the things that the university is really great about is providing access to technology on the university end. They're not so great about offering support services and technology to pre-college programs, right? And so when you think about developing a pre-college program, especially for a student who's still in high school, they are not end users. They were never the targeted population to provide services from. So anyone who wants to do a pre-college program, one, you got to make sure that they have guest accounts if you want them to log into anything, right? And so that's a long process in itself. So we worked with the Ohio Department, or not the Ohio Department, I'm sorry, the ODEE office on campus. And they helped us quickly turn around and create, the university has a comparative program to Carmen called Scarlet Network that are for guests. And so for our summer programs with our high school students, we were able to create like a Carmen module for our high school students to use to create a suppository of information that looked like and looks like a Carmen shell. And so we updated and provided all of our contact and our daily instructional information. We use Zoom, and then basically they could go back and download the worksheets and things of that sort. So we did that for our high school students. Armeda, if you want to talk about how we're using Zoom for our college programs.
Like Shayla said, we used Zoom for everything. Bridge courses were taught on Zoom. We had one hybrid class that was our economics course, but we had our orientation sessions on Zoom in our early arrival program as well. And it definitely took some planning, you know, which sessions are going to be breakout rooms, which sessions need their own Zoom links. I mean, when you're transitioning almost 100 students from one Zoom to the next, or splitting them up, or you have multiple guest speakers, you're collaborating with other units. It was a big endeavor, but it works, or it worked. Did have students who were actively attending and engaged. The picture of our Zoom meeting on the PowerPoint that we did was actually from our early arrival program, and the students are there wishing me happy birthday and just engaging with each other in the chat. So I think it's, you know, it's the relationship building piece that really helps to lend to the success of that. If you're able to develop these relationships with students, or you're able to impress upon them that you're there to support and it's authentic, then, you know, they'll follow your lead.
Yeah, I would add too, for me, it was, we did have a couple of Zoom sessions that were webinar style, and those were somewhere like our department leadership were doing presentations and fireside chats, but it was important to us that we hosted most of our Zoom sessions in meeting style, so that the students could see, even if it was a black screen, they could see the names, they can engage with us. Our presentation style is really relaxed, and I think that reverberates across our unit. We are pretty relaxed in the way that we present. And so you may come into a Zoom session and we may be, you know, doing music or just really hanging out for a while. So just having these common spaces. One day during our early arrival program, we actually hired a DJ, and you could see students like on the oval, and the DJ was just playing music and they were just kind of hanging out. So just really trying to use Zoom as a place to create these networks, create these family experiences among them.
All right. Well, if there is not any more questions, once again, we thank you, Shayla and Armeda, for your great presentation. And I hope to see you all participating more in our series that is coming up these next few weeks. So I hope you all have a great day, and thank you for joining us. Like I said, these sessions will be recorded. If you missed out or you came late, we will send out that link to you all at a later date. But once again, thank you all for joining us, and you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Eddie.
Y'all did